rancher gave his only horse to the Apache, and at dawn the chief arrived with 50 thoroughbreds. It was early winter on the outskirts of a small frontier town, where the wind cut sharply through the open plains, and the snow, thin but stubborn, lay in scattered patches across the ground. The rancher, a man of simple habits and strong principles, woke with the first light of dawn. His small log cabin, built by his own hands years before, seemed even lonelier in the cold morning. Yet he did not mind the solitude. Life on the plains was never easy, and solitude was often a companion one learned to respect. Outside, his horse, a loyal chestnut with a coat that glistened even in the weak sunlight, nickered softly. The horse was more than just an animal. It had been a companion through long winters, scorching summers, and endless miles across the open fields. They had grown together, relying on one another in ways few could understand. The rancher brushed his hand over the horse's mane, feeling the warmth of its body against the chill in the air, and for a moment he allowed himself a rare smile. The winter had come early that year, harsher than usual. Food was scarce, and the snow, though not deep, had frozen the ground enough to make travel difficult. The rancher had been rationing his supplies carefully, knowing that the season would demand patience and caution. Despite his own hardships, he had a keen eye for the struggles of others. From the edge of his property, he noticed a small group of Apache who had made a temporary camp near the woods. They were thin and weary, their blankets threadbare, their small children shivering beside them. The rancher had often encountered travelers, traders, and even wandering hunters in his life, but the Apache were different. He had no desire for conflict. He respected their skill and their quiet strength. Over time, he had learned bits and pieces of their ways from conversations at the town market and from old travelers' stories. What struck him most was their resilience. Even in the face of hunger and cold, they carried themselves with dignity. Yet on this day, the rancher saw the clear signs of desperation. The snow had made hunting difficult, and their horses, weak from lack of food, could not carry them far. The rancher stood at the edge of his barn, his hand resting on the cold wood of the door. He thought about his own horse, the faithful creature that had never failed him, that had helped him plow the fields, carry supplies, and even saved him during a sudden winter storm years ago. To give away this horse would be no small sacrifice. It would mean walking to town on foot, enduring the harsh winter, and perhaps facing dangers alone. But as he watched the Apache struggle to tend to their camp, his heart ached with the knowledge that a simple act could change their fate. He remembered his father's words, spoken long ago beside a roaring fire. "The measure of a man is not what he keeps, but what he gives away." Those words had always stayed with him, echoing in quiet moments like these. The rancher sighed deeply and made his decision. There was no hesitation, no debate in his mind. He would give his horse to the Apache family. It was not a decision made lightly. He walked to the barn, opening the door slowly to let the horse out. The creature looked at him with trusting eyes, unaware of the choice being made on its behalf. The rancher gently patted its neck, whispering words of comfort as he led it toward the small camp at the edge of the forest. The Apache, seeing him approach, stood quietly, unsure of his intentions. The rancher spoke to them in calm, simple words, explaining that the horse was theirs to use, that it could carry them to safety and help them survive the winter. The chief, a man whose face told stories of countless battles and survival, accepted the gift with a deep nod. There was no boastfulness, no need for words. The rancher could see the gratitude in his eyes, a silent understanding that this was more than just an exchange of property. It was a bond formed in trust and respect. The children reached out to stroke the horse, their small hands brushing against the warm coat, their faces lighting up with wonder and relief. As the rancher turned to leave, he felt a pang of emptiness. His faithful companion, the horse that had been with him through thick and thin, was now with another family. Yet there was also a strange sense of peace. He knew he had done the right thing. The horse would be cared for, and in return, a family in need would have a chance to survive the harsh season. He walked back toward his cabin, the wind biting at his cheeks, but he held his head high, knowing that generosity often demanded sacrifice. The town, when he returned, whispered of his act. Some called him foolish, questioning why he would give away something so valuable. Others, however, understood the quiet courage it took to help others without expectation. The rancher paid little attention to gossip. He understood that life on the frontier required tough choices, and true worth was measured not by what one kept, but by what one gave freely. Night fell, and the rancher sat by his small fireplace, the glow of the flames reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. He remembered his own struggles, the times when a stranger had offered help without asking for anything in return. Those moments had shaped him, teaching him that kindness was its own reward. Now, in the quiet of his cabin, he felt a connection to the Apache family he had helped. Somewhere in the cold night, his horse was warming a child, carrying supplies, and providing comfort to those who needed it most. He slept that night with a sense of calm he had rarely felt. The wind howled outside, rattling the wooden beams of his cabin, but inside there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from the knowledge that he had acted with courage and compassion. Generosity, he realized, was not weakness. It was strength measured in the currency of trust and humanity. Morning came slowly, the sun barely breaking through the thick clouds. The rancher stepped outside, his boots crunching against the thin frost that coated the ground. He looked toward the horizon, wondering how the family was faring, hoping that the horse was helping them in ways he could not see. He smiled softly, knowing that the true reward of his action might never be fully known, but that it was real nonetheless. As he went about his day, repairing fences and tending to the small garden that stubbornly survived the winter chill, he carried a quiet pride. It was a pride not in possession, not in wealth or recognition, but in the knowledge that he had acted with integrity. Every movement, every decision, every small act of kindness, he thought, shaped the world in ways that could not always be measured, but could always be felt. The rancher's story that winter was not one of dramatic battles or daring adventures. It was a story of quiet courage, of moral strength, and of the kind of generosity that changes lives in ways unseen. And though he did not know it yet, this single act, the gift of his horse, would ripple outward, touching hearts and building bonds that neither he nor the Apache family could have imagined. He finished his chores, paused for a moment to look back at the path leading to the Apache camp, and whispered a soft blessing for the family and his horse. He returned to his cabin, ready to face the long winter, carrying in his heart the warmth of knowing that even in the harshest conditions, humanity could shine brightly. The days after the rancher gave his horse to the Apache family were quiet, but they were not easy. Each morning, he woke to the same sharp winter wind cutting across the plains, and each evening, he returned from his chores to the empty barn where his faithful companion had once stood. The absence of the horse weighed on him more than he had expected. It was not just the physical help the horse had provided. It was the companionship, the bond forged through years of shared struggles, that left a quiet emptiness in the rancher's heart. He walked the fields every day, boots sinking into the frost-hardened earth, keeping an eye on the perimeter of his small land. He thought about the Apache family constantly. He wondered if the horse had helped them through the cold nights, if the children had smiled as they rode across the plains, if the chief had found the gift to be truly useful. There was a sense of uncertainty, a nagging question that he could not shake. Had he done the right thing? At the town market, life continued in its usual rhythm. Traders shouted their wares, children played along the dirt paths, and neighbors exchanged greetings with a casual familiarity. Yet, the rancher noticed the whispers, the sideways glances, the muted voices as people talked about his choice. Some called him foolish. Giving away your only horse to strangers. What a waste, they muttered. Others were less direct but wore a look of judgment, questioning why a man would act in such a way without expecting anything in return. The rancher, however, did not let their words reach him. He had long ago learned that life on the frontier demanded a certain resilience, not just against the harsh weather or the challenges of farming, but against the opinions of others. Still, he could not deny that their whispers gnawed at him at times, a small shadow of doubt creeping into his thoughts during the coldest, loneliest hours of the night. He spent much of his time repairing fences, gathering firewood, and tending to his small winter crops, but every task felt heavier without the horse. Tasks that had once seemed simple now required more effort, more time, and more patience. He realized how much he had relied on his companion, not just for labor, but for support in ways words could not describe. The quiet barn, the empty field, and the lack of familiar hoofbeats became constant reminders of what he had given away. Despite these challenges, the rancher's spirit remained unbroken. He found small ways to remind himself why he had made his choice. Each time he returned home, he looked toward the distant hills where the Apache camp had been, imagining the horse carrying supplies, warming the children during the cold nights, and giving the family a chance to survive when survival had seemed impossible. The thought brought him a strange comfort, a sense of purpose that helped him endure the long, frozen days. One morning, a traveling trader arrived at the rancher's cabin. The man, weary from the road and covered in layers of dust and snow, greeted him warmly and asked after his well-being. Over the course of their conversation, the trader mentioned seeing the Apache family on the edge of the forest, riding a strong horse across the plains. They looked well, the trader said, and the horse seemed to carry them with ease. Whoever gave them that gift must have a good heart. The rancher nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. Hearing that the family had benefited from his generosity eased the ache in his chest, but it also reminded him of how much he missed his own horse. He returned to his chores with renewed determination, finding solace in the knowledge that his choice had made a real difference in the lives of others. As the days passed, winter deepened. Snow began to cover the ground more consistently, and the winds grew sharper, cutting across the plains with icy fingers. The rancher had to be more careful as he traveled across his property, breaking ice in the water troughs, tending to the animals, and ensuring that his small stock of supplies would last. Each night as he returned to his cabin, he reflected on the past week, the decisions he had made, and the uncertainty that still lingered. There were nights when he questioned his actions. Sitting by the fire, he sometimes wondered if the horse had truly been the help the Apache family needed, or if it had been too little, too late. Yet every doubt was tempered by the image of the family riding safely across the plains, their burdens eased, if only slightly, by his sacrifice. The rancher realized that generosity was never easy, and that acts of kindness often demanded courage and faith in ways that were difficult to measure. During one particularly cold evening, as the wind howled outside, the rancher noticed a lone figure moving across the snow-covered fields. He squinted, trying to make out who it might be. As the figure drew closer, he recognized a young Apache boy, bundled in blankets and carrying a small bundle of firewood. The boy approached cautiously, eyes wide with both fear and curiosity. He handed the firewood to the rancher, bowing slightly in gratitude. Though he could not speak the same language fluently, the gesture spoke volumes. The rancher felt a warmth spread through his chest. The boy's simple act of thanks reminded him that kindness created connections that transcended words. It reinforced the belief that what he had given was not lost, but had taken root in ways he could not yet see. That night, he thought of the horse again, imagining it standing strong in the cold, giving life and hope to the family that now relied on it. Word of the rancher's generosity began to spread quietly through the town. While some still whispered with disbelief, others began to view him with a new respect. People noticed the courage it took to give without expecting anything in return, the strength required to act with compassion in a world that often valued survival over empathy. The rancher paid little attention to recognition, but he could not deny the small sense of pride that came with knowing he had done the right thing. Winter continued its relentless march. Snow piled higher, rivers froze, and the days grew shorter, but the rancher adapted, relying on his skills, patience, and resilience. Each task, no matter how small, became a reminder of the strength needed to survive and thrive in a harsh world. And through it all, the thought of the Apache family and the horse carried him forward, a guiding light in the long, cold days. One morning, as he prepared to check the fences, he noticed tracks in the fresh snow leading toward the distant hills. His heart skipped a beat. The tracks were unlike those of a lone traveler. They were larger, more deliberate, and carried the weight of multiple animals. He paused, squinting into the distance, wondering if the family had returned or if the horse had come back in some unexpected way. A mix of excitement and nervousness filled him, but he knew better than to expect anything. On the frontier, surprises could be both blessings and challenges. As he continued his work, he noticed other signs: broken twigs, disturbed snow, and the faint sound of hoofbeats echoing across the plains. Each indication strengthened a hope he dared not fully embrace. The rancher worked steadily, keeping his mind focused on the tasks at hand, but he could not ignore the growing anticipation building within him. That evening, he sat by the fire, reflecting on the strange mixture of emotions the past week had brought. He had experienced the weight of sacrifice, the uncertainty of giving, and the quiet joy of knowing he had helped another family survive. He realized that life on the frontier was not just about endurance, but about the choices made in moments of moral courage. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, carried the potential to change lives in ways that could never be fully measured. The rancher drifted into sleep that night with the same sense of quiet hope that had carried him through the days. He dreamed of snow-covered plains, of a horse galloping across the horizon, and of a small Apache family riding safely through the winter. In his dreams, he felt the deep connection between generosity and trust, a bond that neither distance nor hardship could break. By the time dawn arrived, the rancher was awake, ready to face another day. The wind still howled, and the snow still clung stubbornly to the earth, but there was a renewed sense of purpose in his step. He understood that the days ahead would test him in ways both expected and unforeseen. Yet, he also knew that true strength lay not just in survival, but in the courage to act with compassion, even when the outcome was uncertain. And so, the rancher continued his work, his heart carrying both the ache of loss and the warmth of hope. Each moment was a reminder that generosity was not measured in reward, but in the quiet knowledge that one had made a difference in the life of another. The days stretched on, harsh and unforgiving, but the rancher faced them with a resilience born of experience, faith, and a simple, unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The rancher woke that morning with a sense of quiet unease. The previous days had been long and cold, and although he had seen the signs of the horse's impact on the Apache family, something in the air felt different. The wind carried a sharper edge, and the snow seemed heavier, lying thick across the fields and weighing down the skeletal branches of the trees. The plains were silent in a way that unsettled him, not a bird, not an animal stirring, only the faint creak of the frozen earth under the weight of winter. He stepped outside, boots crunching in the frost, and looked across the horizon. For a moment he thought he saw movement, a faint blur against the white landscape. His heart quickened. Could it be the Apache family returning, or perhaps someone else entirely? Life on the frontier had taught him that not all appearances were as they seemed, and he knew that curiosity, if not tempered with caution, could lead to danger. The morning passed slowly. He repaired fences, chopped wood, and fed his small herd, but his mind was elsewhere. Every distant noise, every shadow cast by the low winter sun, seemed amplified, hinting at possibilities he could neither confirm nor deny. By mid-afternoon, he noticed deeper tracks in the snow, fresh, deliberate hoofprints that led from the direction of the Apache camp toward his property. His pulse quickened. He felt a mixture of hope, apprehension, and a strange sense of anticipation. Something was coming, though he did not yet know what it would be. The rancher had always been cautious. Years of living on the plains had taught him that generosity and trust were virtues, but that they did not eliminate risk. He fetched his rifle, not for violence but for protection, and kept it close as he approached the edge of his property. His eyes scanned the horizon. Slowly, he began to make out the shapes of animals moving through the snow, large, powerful creatures with strong legs and flowing manes. His breath caught in his throat. These were no ordinary horses. They were magnificent, well-cared-for animals, unlike any he had ever seen roaming the plains. As they drew closer, he realized that the horses were led by a figure dressed in traditional Apache clothing, a man with a tall, commanding presence. It was the chief. The rancher could feel his heart pound, not with fear, but with awe. The chief approached with a quiet dignity, his eyes calm but carrying an intensity that made the rancher feel both small and honored. Around him were dozens of horses, moving in an orderly line, their coats glistening despite the cold, their breath steaming in the winter air. The rancher stood frozen for a moment, taking in the sight. 50 thoroughbred horses, each more magnificent than the last, surrounded the chief. It was more than a gift. It was a statement of respect, trust, and honor. He realized that his simple act of giving his only horse without expecting anything in return, had been recognized in a way he could never have imagined. The chief's arrival was not just repayment. It was a demonstration of gratitude, a bridge between two worlds built on integrity and kindness. The chief dismounted gracefully, approaching the rancher with a steady, respectful gait. He spoke few words, but his gestures and expression conveyed volumes. The rancher understood immediately. The chief had come to honor him, to acknowledge the sacrifice he had made, and to offer a gift far greater than anything the rancher could have expected. The sheer magnitude of the gesture left him speechless. He had always believed in the power of generosity, but seeing it reflected so profoundly was humbling beyond words. As the chief motioned toward the horses, the rancher walked among them in awe. Each animal was strong, well-fed, and clearly valued. He could see the care that had gone into raising and training them. It was a gift that could transform the rancher's life, but it was also a symbol, a reminder that selflessness and integrity had their own rewards, often in ways far beyond immediate material gain. The rancher realized that he had been part of a cycle of respect and honor that transcended culture and language. The children of the Apache family watched from a distance, their faces bright with excitement and curiosity. They had grown attached to the rancher's horse, and now they saw their father, the chief, leading an entire herd of horses toward him. Their eyes reflected awe and joy, but also an understanding that they were witnessing a rare moment of connection between two very different worlds. The rancher, too, felt that connection. He felt the unspoken bond of trust, forged through a simple act of kindness, growing stronger with each passing moment. As the chief led him to the front of the herd, the rancher felt a wave of emotions, gratitude, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility. He understood that this gift was not merely for his benefit, it carried with it expectations, respect, and a challenge. The chief's gaze was steady, as if silently asking, "Will you honor this gift? Will you continue to act with integrity?" The rancher nodded, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and resolve. He understood that actions, even those done in simplicity, had consequences that could ripple far beyond their origin. The town, if they had been watching, would have called it miraculous. The rancher, however, saw it as the natural result of a simple truth. Kindness and generosity, when offered sincerely, returned in forms one could never predict. Yet, even as he felt the warmth of gratitude and recognition, he knew that the frontier demanded vigilance. The horses were a blessing, but they also represented a responsibility. Each day he would need to care for them, protect them from the harsh winter, and ensure that they thrived. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow, the rancher and the chief worked side by side, tending to the new herd. The rancher marveled at the skill and experience of the chief, who moved with quiet authority, commanding the horses with subtle gestures and calm words. The rancher learned quickly, guided by respect and patience, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The horses were no longer just animals. They were symbols of honor, trust, and the profound power of giving. Night fell, and the rancher returned to his cabin with a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The fire crackled warmly, reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. He thought about the winter ahead, the challenges that remained, and the lessons he had learned. Generosity, he realized, was never measured solely by what one gave. It was also measured by what one inspired in return. The chief's gesture had transformed his understanding of kindness, proving that even the simplest acts could create profound ripples of honor, respect, and connection. As he drifted to sleep, the rancher thought about the path that had brought him here. He remembered the lonely mornings, the difficult decisions, the moments of doubt, and the quiet hope that had carried him through the harshest days. He understood now that his actions had a power far greater than he had imagined. They could inspire trust, foster relationships, and even reshape the world in small, meaningful ways. The rancher's dreams that night were vivid. He saw himself riding across the plains, surrounded by the herd of magnificent horses, the wind cold but exhilarating against his face. He imagined the Apache family riding alongside him, the children laughing as they guided their horses, and the chief walking with quiet dignity, watching the bonds formed between two worlds. In his dreams, he felt the unity of respect, generosity, and honor, a force far stronger than any hardship the frontier could present. Morning came again, and with it, the realization that life on the plains was never predictable. The rancher had given his horse, faced loneliness and doubt, and yet discovered a profound truth. Acts of true kindness, no matter how small, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. The chief's gift of 50 horses was not merely a repayment. It was a lesson, a reminder that generosity could transcend culture, language, and circumstance. The rancher began the day with a renewed sense of purpose. He tended to the new herd carefully, learning their temperaments, understanding their needs, and respecting their strength. Each horse carried the memory of his own sacrifice, a living testament to the power of selflessness. He knew that winter would be harsh, that challenges were still ahead, but he felt ready. He had learned that courage was not just in enduring hardship, but in acting rightly, even when the outcome was uncertain. Through the long winter days that followed, the rancher worked tirelessly. He repaired fences stronger than before, gathered more firewood, and ensured that each horse was well fed and cared for. The Apache chief visited occasionally, sharing wisdom, guidance, and stories of his people's traditions. The rancher listened, learned, and respected, building a bond that went beyond mere words, a bond founded on honor, trust, and mutual respect. And so, life continued, shaped by the choices made in moments of quiet courage. The rancher understood that challenges would always come, that uncertainty would never fully disappear, but that integrity, generosity, and respect created strength that no hardship could destroy. The memory of the lonely mornings, the doubts, and the sacrifice of giving his horse remained with him, but it was now transformed into a powerful lesson. That true courage was found in selflessness, and that trust, once earned, could change lives in ways one could never fully predict. Winter had settled fully across the plains, and the rancher's life had changed in ways he had never expected. The herd of 50 thoroughbred horses brought by the Apache chief was now part of his daily routine, and each day presented new challenges. Caring for so many horses in the harsh winter was not easy. There were days when the wind cut through his clothes like knives. Snow drifted high enough to make walking across the fields a struggle, and the cold seeped into his bones despite layers of clothing and blankets. Yet with every hardship, the rancher felt a growing sense of purpose. The morning chores that once took only a few hours now stretched into long, exhausting days. Feeding the horses, checking for injuries, breaking ice in the troughs, and ensuring the animals were sheltered from the bitter wind became a full-time commitment. The rancher rose before sunrise and worked tirelessly until the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, the horizon painted in shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the snowy plains. Despite the exhaustion, he never complained. Each task reminded him of the chief's trust and of the responsibility that came with receiving such an extraordinary gift. The town, meanwhile, continued to watch the rancher with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. News of the Apache chief's arrival and the gift of horses spread quickly. Many townsfolk were amazed, having never seen such an act of honor and gratitude before. Some questioned why the chief would give so much, and some wondered if the rancher could truly care for all of the animals. Yet, the rancher paid little attention to their opinions. He knew that he had been given a rare opportunity, and that the true measure of this gift would not be in what others thought, but in how he acted. As the days passed, the rancher began to notice the subtle ways in which the horses had changed his life. Each animal had its own personality, its own needs, and its own way of responding to care. Some were strong and stubborn, others gentle and timid, yet all were intelligent and perceptive. The rancher spent hours observing them, learning their habits and gaining their trust. The work was demanding, but it was also rewarding. He realized that caring for them was more than a duty. It was a way to honor the trust and respect that had been extended to him by the Apache chief. One particularly cold morning, as frost clung to every branch and the snow sparkled in the pale light of dawn, the rancher noticed that one of the younger horses was limping. The animal had apparently injured its leg while moving across the uneven ground. Panic rose in the rancher's chest. He had never been a skilled healer of animals beyond basic care, and the thought of losing one of these magnificent creatures filled him with fear. He worked carefully, inspecting the leg, cleaning the wound, and fashioning a makeshift bandage. Every moment tested his patience and skill, but slowly the horse began to respond. This moment became a turning point for the rancher. He realized that the gift he had received was not merely a reward for his generosity. It was a responsibility that demanded wisdom, attention, and dedication. Caring for the horses required him to grow in ways he had not anticipated. He read books on animal care, sought advice from experienced ranchers, and learned from the Apache chief whenever he visited. The chief offered guidance with calm authority, showing the rancher subtle techniques for training, feeding, and nurturing the horses. With each lesson, the rancher grew more confident, more skilled, and more connected to the animals in his care. Life was not without its challenges, however. Winter storms sometimes hit without warning, bringing heavy snow, fierce winds, and bitter cold. On such days, the rancher would wake before dawn, dig paths through deep snow, and lead the horses to shelter. He often found himself exhausted by nightfall, muscles sore and spirit tested. Yet he pressed on, knowing that the well-being of the horses depended entirely on his diligence. Each challenge strengthened his resolve, teaching him the importance of patience, resilience, and the quiet courage needed to face adversity. Amid the hardships, the rancher also found moments of unexpected joy. He watched the younger horses play in the snow, racing each other across the fields, their laughter like whinnies carrying across the quiet plains. The older horses moved with dignity and grace, reminding him of the beauty of strength and experience. He began to notice the subtle ways in which the herd interacted, how they cared for each other, and how their trust in him deepened each day. These small moments of connection brought warmth to his heart, even during the coldest winter days. The Apache chief visited periodically, bringing supplies, sharing stories, and checking on the rancher's progress. Each visit reinforced the bond between them, a relationship built on respect, honor, and shared understanding. The chief did not speak in grand speeches or demand recognition. His presence alone conveyed trust and approval. The rancher found these visits both inspiring and humbling. He realized that the chief's gift was not merely material. It was a symbol of faith, a challenge to rise to a higher standard of care, responsibility, and integrity. One afternoon, as the rancher was mending a broken fence, he noticed a group of townsfolk approaching. They had come to see the horses, to witness firsthand the result of the rancher's generosity and the Apache chief's remarkable gift. The rancher greeted them warmly, though with a quiet humility. The townsfolk were amazed at the transformation. They saw the skill and dedication required to care for the herd, the harmony between the horses and the rancher, and the evident bond that had formed. Their amazement was tinged with respect, and some began to view the rancher not as foolish, but as a man of true character. As the days grew longer and winter slowly gave way to the early hints of spring, the rancher reflected on how much he had grown. He had faced exhaustion, uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility. He had learned patience, courage, and the art of understanding creatures far different from himself. He had discovered the quiet strength that comes from giving selflessly and honoring the trust of others. The horses, once a symbol of generosity, had become teachers, guiding him toward a deeper understanding of life, respect, and the value of diligence. The rancher also noticed how the gift had changed his relationship with the Apache family. Though they remained mostly apart, there was now an unspoken bond, a connection that went beyond words or distance. Their shared understanding of honor, gratitude, and integrity created a silent friendship that transcended cultural differences. The rancher realized that generosity had a ripple effect, influencing not just the immediate recipient, but also shaping relationships and strengthening communities. One evening, as the sun set and the snow glowed in soft shades of pink and gold, the rancher walked among the horses, gently patting their necks and whispering to them. He felt a profound sense of peace. Despite the challenges, the exhaustion, and the harsh winter, he had found purpose, meaning, and a sense of fulfillment that no material possession could provide. The gift of the horses had transformed not only his life, but also his understanding of the world and his place within it. The rancher knew that life would continue to bring challenges. The plains were unpredictable, storms would return, and the herd would always require attention and care. Yet, he felt ready. He had learned that true strength was measured not by what one possessed, but by what one was willing to give, protect, and nurture. The lessons of responsibility, resilience, and integrity would guide him through every storm, every hardship, and every future challenge. And so the rancher continued his work, tending to the horses, caring for his land, and building a life that reflected the values he held dear. The winter was harsh, but it was also a season of growth, learning, and reflection. He had discovered that true generosity did not end with giving. It continued through the care, respect, and responsibility one showed afterward. Each day was an opportunity to honor the gift he had received, to demonstrate integrity, and to build connections that would last a lifetime. By the time spring arrived, melting the snow and revealing the first signs of green across the plains, the rancher had changed in ways he could scarcely have imagined. He was stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around him. The horses thrived under his care. The Apache family remained a respected presence in his thoughts and life, and the town had come to see him as a man of remarkable character. He had learned that sacrifices, when made with a pure heart, could lead to unexpected blessings, profound growth, and relationships built on trust and honor. The rancher often paused to reflect on the journey so far. From the lonely days of giving away his only horse, through the challenges of winter, to the care of the magnificent herd, he had experienced the full spectrum of struggle and reward. Each moment, each decision had shaped him, teaching lessons that could not be learned in any other way. He understood now that life on the plains was not only about survival, but about how one treated others, the choices one made, and the integrity with which one lived. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set behind the distant hills and the herd moved peacefully across the plains, the rancher felt a deep gratitude, not only for the gift of the horses, but for the chance to grow, to learn, and to live a life guided by generosity, honor, and the quiet strength of character. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he also knew that he was ready for whatever lay ahead, strengthened by the lessons of the past, the bonds he had formed, and the unwavering belief in the power of selfless giving. Spring had finally arrived on the plains. The snow had melted, the rivers flowed freely, and the sun warmed the earth with a gentle strength that promised new beginnings. The rancher stood at the edge of his land, watching the herd of 50 thoroughbred horses move gracefully across the fields. Each horse seemed full of life and energy, their coats shining in the sunlight, their movements strong and confident. The rancher's heart swelled with pride. Months of hard work, care, and dedication had brought them to this moment, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The winter had been harsh and unforgiving, testing him in ways he had never imagined. There had been days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, when the cold seemed unbearable, and when doubts crept into his mind like unwelcome shadows. Yet, he had persevered. The challenges had taught him patience, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from doing what is right, even when it is difficult. The gift of the horses had been more than a reward for his generosity. It had been a lesson in responsibility, trust, and the power of selfless action. Over the months, the rancher had grown closer to the Apache chief and his family. Though they came and went with the seasons, their visits were filled with warmth, mutual respect, and shared understanding. The chief had taught him subtle ways to care for the horses, showing patience and wisdom in every gesture. The rancher had listened attentively, learning not only about the animals, but also about the importance of honor, gratitude, and connection. Each lesson strengthened their bond, bridging the gap between two worlds with a quiet dignity that neither needed to explain. The town had also begun to view the rancher differently. Where once there had been whispers of foolishness, now there was admiration. People came to see the herd, to witness the result of hard work and dedication. They marveled at the rancher's skill, his patience, and the evident trust between him and the horses. Yet, the rancher never sought praise. He understood that recognition was fleeting, and that the true reward lay in knowing he had acted with integrity and honor. The admiration of others was welcome, but it was secondary to the satisfaction of a life lived rightly. One morning, as the rancher was checking the fences, he noticed movement on the horizon. At first he thought it was the wind stirring the trees, but soon he realized that it was the Apache chief and his family, riding toward him on horseback. The sight filled him with anticipation and gratitude. The chief approached with a calm, measured gait, a silent smile of acknowledgement on his face. The rancher felt a sense of joy and respect swell within him. Their bond had been tested through seasons of hardship and care, and now it was stronger than ever. The chief spoke few words, but his gestures were full of meaning. He presented the rancher with a simple gift, a finely crafted saddle and bridle, symbolic of trust, respect, and the shared journey they had undertaken. The rancher accepted with humility, understanding that the gift represented far more than its material value. It was a recognition of his dedication, a testament to his integrity, and a reminder of the importance of generosity and honor. In that moment, the rancher felt a profound sense of connection, not only with the chief and his family, but with the wider world of trust and mutual respect. The Apache children played among the horses, laughing and riding with delight. The rancher watched them, his heart full, remembering the first time he had given his only horse to the family. He recalled the uncertainty, the loneliness, and the small doubts that had accompanied that act of generosity. Now, seeing the joy, the thriving animals, and the strengthened bond between them, he understood fully the depth of what had been achieved. A single act of kindness had grown into something far greater than he could have imagined. As the days turned into weeks, the rancher reflected on all he had learned. The gift of the horses had brought immense responsibility, but it had also brought immense growth. He had learned patience in ways that books and stories could not teach. He had learned humility, understanding that caring for another being, human or animal, required attention, respect, and love. He had learned the quiet joy of giving, the unspoken reward of seeing others thrive because of his actions. And he had learned that trust, once earned, was a bond stronger than any obstacle the world could present. The rancher also noticed subtle changes in himself. Where once he had felt isolated and alone on the plains, he now felt connected to the land, to the horses, to the Apache family, and to the broader community. His life had gained depth, richness, and meaning through the experiences of the past months. He realized that true wealth was not measured in material possessions, but in the connections one nurtured, the integrity one upheld, and the generosity one offered without expectation. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields, the rancher rode among the horses. He had grown skilled in handling the herd, guiding them with confidence and care. Each horse responded to him with trust and respect, a reflection of the patience and dedication he had poured into their care. He paused to watch the Apache children riding alongside him, their laughter carrying across the plains. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every hardship had been worthwhile. The journey had shaped him, strengthened him, and shown him the true power of kindness. As evening approached, the rancher returned to his cabin. He lit the fire and sat by its warmth, reflecting on the path that had led him here. From the lonely days of giving his only horse, through the challenges of winter, and to the care of the magnificent herd, he had experienced the full range of human emotion, fear, doubt, exhaustion, joy, pride, and humility. He understood now that life's true lessons were learned not in comfort, but in moments of challenge and choice, when one had the opportunity to act with integrity and compassion. The town continued to respect him, the Apache family maintained their visits, and the herd thrived under his care. Yet, the rancher knew that life on the plains would always bring new challenges. Storms would return, the land would demand hard work, and the responsibilities of caring for the horses would never fully end. But he also knew that he was prepared. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more patient. He had learned that true courage was found not only in facing danger, but in living rightly, acting selflessly, and honoring trust in every action. One morning, the rancher walked to the top of a small hill overlooking his land. The herd grazed peacefully below, the Apache family nearby, and the town visible in the distance. He breathed deeply, feeling the wind on his face, the sun on his back, and the quiet hum of life around him. He realized that his journey had come full circle. From a moment of selfless giving had sprung trust, respect, and a life richer than he could have imagined. He had learned that the smallest acts of kindness could have the most profound effects, shaping not only the lives of others, but one's own as well. The rancher often recalled the first time he had handed over his only horse. At the time, it had seemed like a loss, a sacrifice that would leave him weaker and more vulnerable. But he had discovered that true strength comes from giving without expectation, that integrity carries rewards beyond the material, and that kindness has a way of returning to those who offer it in unexpected and powerful ways. He had been tested, challenged, and transformed, and he understood now the true meaning of generosity. The Apache chief visited one last time before the full arrival of spring, riding alongside the rancher across the plains. They rode in silence, the connection between them unspoken but deeply understood. The chief's eyes reflected approval and gratitude, and the rancher felt a sense of closure and fulfillment. Their bond, forged in the shared experience of trust and respect, would last a lifetime, even as seasons changed and life moved forward. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the rancher returned to his cabin. He looked out over the fields, over the herd, and toward the distant hills. He felt a deep peace, knowing that he had acted rightly, faced challenges with courage, and nurtured life with patience and care. The lessons of winter, the gift of the horses, and the connection with the Apache family had transformed him. He had learned that true reward lies not in what is received, but in what is given freely, with a pure heart. The rancher spent the following days tending to the land, caring for the herd, and building a life that reflected the lessons he had learned. The horses thrived, the Apache family visited occasionally, and the town had come to see him as a man of integrity and honor. Yet the rancher remained humble. He understood that the true measure of life was not in recognition, wealth, or possession, but in the choices one made, the trust one honored, and the kindness one offered without expectation. And so, life on the plains continued. The rancher had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He had learned that generosity is never wasted, that trust is a bond to be cherished, and that integrity carries rewards beyond measure. The story of the single horse he had given, the trust he had honored, and the gift of 50 thoroughbreds would be remembered not just for the animals, but for the lessons of life it represented. In the quiet moments, when the sun set over the plains and the horses moved peacefully across the fields, the rancher would smile. He knew that he had lived rightly, faced challenges bravely, and acted with a heart open to kindness and trust. He had discovered the power of generosity, the strength of integrity, and the lasting beauty of human connection. And in that, he found true fulfillment.